Today we're going to take a look at some winter landscape paintings and talk about the different problems that you can have in painting winter landscapes. And then we're going to talk about the solutions to make those paintings work better. Now, in this lesson, we're going to be talking about winter paintings, and in particular, snow and the different aspects of snow. There's 5 of them I want to talk about, things about snow to remember. The first one is the contrast and value. When you're painting snow, you get instant, strong contrast value-wise. Whether it's a sunny day, cloudy day, doesn't really matter. You're going to have really strong contrast. It always makes for stronger painting. This is a painting by John Carlson. It's more midday when things kind of flatten out. If this was a summer or a spring painting, it would be a lot less contrasty because there would be less value change between these hills and these hills. These would be a lot darker and just give you less contrast. So instant, stronger paintings when you're using snow. The other thing about Carlson, whether he's painting snow or not, he always has these, in the flat areas, things are kind of still half rounded. You never really see a flat area on the ground in the flat plane with him. Everything is kind of half rounded. It gives it that solid, kind of heavy look, like it's three-dimensional. Nothing worse in a painting than having too many just straight lines here, with the house sitting on a straight line, trees sitting on a straight line. The minute you emphasize that kind of half-roundedness, it makes it fuller. And he does that in everything. Now this is Aldro Hibbard. And both these guys live, northern New York, northern Massachusetts, so a lot of snow paintings, and they painted in the snow. I know Carlson didn't use photographs. I don't think Aldro Hibbard did either, so everything is either from memory or from a smaller sketch outside. And when you do that, I think that's a disadvantage we have in the modern era of just using photographs too much. We're used to the photograph. And that kind of distorts how we see things. When you start painting outside, and you learn outside instead of learning from photographs, you learn to see things differently, learn to simplify a lot quicker. They painted a lot outside in the snow, a little hardier than we are, I think. But again, the instant contrast between anything that's vertical, whether it's houses, trees, mountains, the light snow gives you that stronger contrast. And here also, Aldro Hibbard, very strong contrast. Sunny day, these have all been sunlit days, but even on a cloudy day, which we'll get to some here, or evening when the sun's kind of out of the picture, there's still that strong contrast. So make sure you don't see too many light values in the water. What light values you see in the water are always going to be darker than the snow. Keeping that contrast very strong. Also about snow paintings, you get a lot of broken color. This is another Aldro Hibbard. In the shadows here, there's a lot more than just one color. And shadows aren't gray in snow. There are all kinds of colors. There could be some gray in it. They could be very muted, but they're always a color, cooler color. But then a lot of reflected color. There's a lot of reflected color bouncing into these high ridges of snow in the shadow that are different than the flatter. So this goes like this. It comes out, down, and down. And that's those ridges. You can see it more in the sunlit area. And it's just catching reflected light in the shadow, so it's a lot warmer. But there's blues, violets, oranges, red violets, greens. A lot of color in there. The key is it's all pretty much one value. Let's get a black and white version here, and you can see, you take the color away, there's a little bit of value change in the dark shadow, but not much. And actually, he's got this dark shadow pretty light. He's gotten it pretty much a high key value so we can get more color in there. But the minute you see the color, that's where all the variation is. And it isn't a value change. It's more of just a color change. The other thing about snow is to make it read really well, you need 3 distinct values. You have the shadow value, you have the halftone, which is in the light, and then here you have the lights. Those areas that stick up and catch the lightest values. So halftone, light, and shadow. And when you get those 3 values in there, it becomes a little more three-dimensional. Works really well. And you can think in terms of where the sunlight's coming from. Sunlight's pretty low here. You can tell by the long shadows. So it's coming in this way, which means any snow that gets vertical, like these ridges, becomes the lightest. Then the light is right here. This is actually the light snow. This is the lightest snow. Or you could think of this as highlight, halftone, so on, and then of course the shadow. And you got to simplify when you do that. You push things together, smaller shapes, and make bigger shapes and simpler values. It's going to read a lot better. And this is a Carl Peterson. He was another Massachusetts painter. And the other aspect about snow is it gives you a sense of simplicity. There's not a lot of detail you have to do with snow paintings. You can see here he just has to get the 3 value changes in the snow and then some value changes of dark. So you could probably count the value changes in here. It's just a matter of coming up with kind of abstract shapes. But the snow adds a simplicity to everything that makes it easier to compose. And take advantage of that. Don't think in terms of detail when you have snow. Think in terms of how simple can I make it. And it's always going to read a lot better. But the shadows aren't real dark. Shadows don't get real dark in snow. Whereas in these pine trees, the shadow would be very dark because the pine trees are so much darker. But light objects have light shadows. That just helps it read more as snow. Now this is painting by James Reynolds. It's a Southwest painter. The other thing about snow, the 4th thing would be the abstract quality to it. It's a lot easier to see things in terms of abstract shapes. You could say that here also. Very abstract. It's more of a zooming in on a closer view of the snowscape. Here it's pulling back, but very abstract oriented. You can see where he's directed the viewer's eye to come in this way. He uses that real light value of the snow to pull the viewer around, and it goes up the tree, hits these lines, and comes back down again. It really allows you to travel throughout that. If you didn't have this snow, you would lose that contrast instantly, and you would have more colors, more value changes in the grass or whatever's in there. But really allows you to keep things very, very simple. Another one here. It's along that same lines. This is Victor Higgins. He's a Taos painter, turn of 20th century. Very abstract, but at the same time, very, very realistic. Very big, solid masses of shape and value. See, the snow gives you that instant contrast with the dark, deep water there and the darker shrubbery. But very, very abstract because of the simplicity. So helps you to keep things very simple if you allow it to, and helps you to see things in terms of abstract shapes. Here's another one by James Reynolds. But again, the simplicity, the verticals are not much going on in there. I mean, you could certainly have another value change within the trees, but it chooses not to. And it gives it that very, very simple look, which emphasizes the light more. The more detail he does here, the more it's going to break up that simplicity and you lose that sense of light, or it's not as strong. But the viewer's eye comes in, follows that tree trunk and winds around in here. And none of that is by accident. I think they're very carefully designed. You know, there's a variation of color and value in the grass and in the rocks and the mountains, but everything else very simple. It's those big masses here that make it work. This is another Aldro Hibbard. A lot of broken color. He has a lot of broken color, especially in the shadows. Lights get so light in the snow that you don't see a lot of color change. Real light objects in the shadow have a lot of color bouncing into them. So you can see the violets, even some green, yellow-green in there. But if you start with the cooler color, one overall slightly muted blue-violet, then into that you could scrub virtually any color you want, because it's going to sink into that cooler, slightly muted color and hold it together. You can see a lot of green in here, and it's just light bouncing back from the water. A lot of reflected light and snow on a sunlit day. Even the flat plane, which doesn't get reflected light, it's reflecting the color in the sky. There's some red violets and violets in there. Snow is a good chance to use that reflected light in there. Now this is a George Inness tonalist painter, and the tonalist focused more on value changes, less on strong variations of color. And usually twilight, late afternoon, maybe early afternoon or morning, when the contrast is a lot less. There's a lot less value change in the tonalist painting. Very soft, and very soft edges too. There's no hard edges at this time of day. Now, you can put them where you want. Your eye goes right here because that's hardest edge, darkest dark, or it could go right here because there's so much contrast between the figures and the snow. But again, that snow gives you the big contrast value, snow, trees, not broken color here because they didn't rely much on color, the tonalists, but the simplicity and the abstract part of the snow painting really carries really well. This is another Inness, maybe same time of day or maybe early morning, but you can see the lack of hard edges because of the time of day. It gives it a totally different feel and very little detail at all. I like the addition of these birds here, but everything is set up on contrast. The real light snow and the dark verticals of trees and houses, and the simplicity, very simple. And last one, here's another John Carlson. And the other thing snow does, it gives you a foil of very simple light value shapes against more detail in the trees. Now he really went to town on the small dark and light shapes in the foliage, which is detail. So a lot of detail in the trees. But it works more because of the snow is so simple in detail. No detail at all, just a very light foil against these darker shapes with a lot more color in detail. Now if this was green grass down here or some kind of grass and had a ton of value changes in it like grass seems to have, then the whole thing would be just way too busy. But because you have such a light area in the sky, snow, and he can use the trees to be more detailed. It certainly works because of those more simple areas. So when you're thinking of snow, think in those terms that you have a high value contrast between dark and light, a lot of broken color in the snow, especially in the shadows on a sunlit day, and the simplicity allows you to simplify a lot more, become more abstract. And then it's a foil for detail. It gives you those big, more simple areas, allows you to get maybe a bit more detailed in some other areas.